Hey there berries, welcome to patch 13.11. It's the patch after the new items were introduced like Echoes of Hylia and a bunch of AD carry items and some support item changes. So this is like a balance patch after those things have happened. I think I was pretty happy with my tier list that I made. I know a lot of it was predictions. I think there's only like 1 or 2 champions on the tier 1 and tier 2 that ended up slipping out, which I'll show you at the end here. So I was pretty happy with my predictions for the patch. And now I've just made some amendments in terms of what champions are, really strong this patch and what champions don't quite hit the mark. But before we get into that, we're going to be looking at the overall buffs and nerfs. So there is a couple of support item changes, and there are also some AD carry item changes, which will affect the support role, as unfortunately we do have to lane with AD carries. As you can see, we have nerfs going to Iridian, Amumu, Aphelios and Jinx. Aphelios and Jinx are the main ones. They're kind of like hyper carry ADs, so generally you're going to be wanting to play like a Milio or a Lulu or a Sona of those kind of champions. With those champions being a bit weaker, it means that laning phase, well, just generally the win rate of those support champions as well is going to go down, because you generally would pick like a Lulu with a Jinx, and now a Jinx being nerfed equals, well, that will impact Lulu's win rate a little bit. Not much, but a little bit. Buffs going over to Akali, Azir, Ivan, Kalista, Rek'Sai, Renekton, and Twist of Fate, and we have the Rell rework finally. Rell is going to be a difficult one to pinpoint in the actual tier list. I have not played her in PvE. I think wait until I give it a go. I'm going to be playing it on stream tomorrow, and yeah, we'll see how it goes and see if she's actually a champion anymore. They do have a bunch of stuff introduced to her, which we'll go through in the very briefly in the list, but expect to see Rell positioned properly in the tier list in 13.12. So item changes: Ardent Censer, Duskblade, Echoes, Gale Force, Kraken, Moonstone, Navori Quick Blades, Hurricane, Static Shift, Storm Razor, and Yumumu's Ghostblade. So a lot of items being changed. A lot of the OP items, particularly like Yumumu's, some people would say like Echoes of Helios OP, but I don't think it necessarily was. That's getting nerfed. I wish they would be a bit more clearer here, whether it's like nerfs or buffs, but there's lots of nerfs and buffs here coming through the items, plus a bunch of skins. Woo! Right, so the first thing that Riot wants us to look at is Rell. So everything's been changed on her apart from her ultimate. Basically, right, there's a lot to go through, but I'm going to just try and go through it as briefly as possible. If you weren't playing Rell before, then you probably won't end up playing her again just yet anyway. You might end up doing one game on her just to test her out. I think overall she's going to be okay, but it's too early to say necessarily otherwise. They basically made it so that her Q stuns, so that's the lance, so it no longer heals, so you don't use it to like poke a little bit. It was kind of pointless ability, really. Honestly, the only use for it was to pop shields. But you can see it. Look, this is the list for. This is just like crazy in terms of stuff changes. This is the most horrendous breakdown I think I've ever seen in terms of a champion rework with all of these removed and used. But basically, passive duration's going up, but you're not going to get like a 10% for, you're not going to steal like 10% of the enemy's resistances. You now have to do like 5 different instances of damage in order to get like up to 12.5%. So get to the same as previous Rell passive, you would now need to hit the enemy target 4 times. You also can't get your passive minions, which was a thing. Also, there was some sort of thing where Rell would lose the resistances if the target she hit initially died. I didn't know that, but yeah. So passive. Overall, I think it's probably going to be a buff. You're going to be in combat a lot and fighting in the big, like, blown out team fights, so you should end up getting the full shred. So Q, as I mentioned, stuns, no longer heals. It's got a shorter range, That is because her E now has a charge effect. So basically, if you remember Rell having like the two orbs under her and under her ally, that stun is not now a thing. It's now you're much more independent, able to stun without an ally, which is quite nice, to be honest. But the range on her Q is shorter, and it already felt quite short anyway. But you have a little bit of extra units behind Rell as well. Once again, honestly, I didn't know Rell could Q behind herself, so this is news to me. So she got a little bit behind you as well, as I guess as someone's like inside your model, I guess. Cooldown does go up because of the stun factor quite dramatically actually. Like if you max Q here, it's 5 seconds, but it's gone up to 9, but that's because of the stun. Also damage has also been reduced, which is like whatever. So you're basically using this as a stun target. You're probably only going to be putting 1 point in this. Also jungle Rell, question mark, hope not, but yeah, we'll see. Then we have W. So W is the same kind of crashing as she has right now. She gets a little bit more resistances when she's dismounted when she does that. But her movement speed apparently is now even worse early, which is, I don't know why, but apparently a buff late game. So that's going to make laning phase feel even more horrendous, but you get some movement speed from the E, so we'll talk about that in a second. Engage on the slide is lower, considerably lower. AoE is lower, jump range is also lower, knockup duration is also lower. So basically they nerfed the entirety of the engage from her W alone. So that's quite worrying, honestly, that they nerfed quite a lot of stuff. Like, who gives a crap, honestly, about attack speed bonus from being dismounted? I think this is stupid. Sorry to be so like blunt if anyone from Riot's watching, but I don't understand this. I know you're trying to make them shred like more often, but I don't know. Like, everything else seems lacking. You've also got the initial movement speed that you would have got has now kind of been nerfed as well. So you're probably only going to be wanting to leave this at one point. The main thing you're going to be maxing first is your E. So your Rell is going to get movement speeds, which increases between level 1 and level 3. And that's her passive. So every time you level up, you're going to get more and more movement speed while you're mounted. So mounted form Rell is going to be quite fast once the game gets going. It's just early game, it's going to be pretty bad still. Active full tilt, so when you're pressing the E button, Rell and an ally charge, so I'm assuming that's your nearest ally, gaining ramping movement speed up to 25%, because you're probably going to max this first to actually be able to engage, over 3 seconds. This is doubled to 50% towards enemies or each other. So you can get 50% movement speed by solo or like joint engaging with whoever your nearest engager is with towards the enemy team. So that's going to be quite nice with like a Hecarim, if you can imagine that. If you have a Hecarim on your team, you're both like zooming in forward. The cavalry charge could be quite funny to watch actually, but there could be some unique things there. Additionally, Rell's next attack or Shattering Strike, which is a Q, explodes in an area and then deals, so let's say 65 plus 4%. It's nothing crazy. The area damage seems okay. It says it explodes in an area. I don't know if that applies to stun. Overall, I think, honestly, right now, early game is just so important. I'm struggling to see, particularly in the lower ELO brackets, where Rell's even going to be viable, just because people won't necessarily be following up using the charge with an ally as much as they probably should do. I feel like Rell's still going to be like a high ELO champion. If used properly in the late game, it seems like you can get some decent engages off. My main question mark here is that, are you actually going to be able to get to late game if your early game is so weak? There's only one way to find out, I guess, and we'll play some games tomorrow to figure that one out. No, hopefully that wasn't too long, but yeah, those notes were horrible to look at. So Amumi has been nerfed. Base Tick of Despair on the W has gone down ever so slightly, nothing too crazy, but it is worth mentioning as he is support viable. Aphelios is getting nerfed by an okay-ish amount as a passive hit, so it is basically roughly about -3 AD on him. Nothing like that crazy, honestly, but it's there. Aurelian is getting nerfed. Hooray. Honestly, there has been so many complaints like saying Aurelian is weak and stuff. He is not weak. Aurelian's not weak. That's the biggest meme that I've ever heard in my life. Aurelian is the most annoying champion, obnoxious, strong champion to play against. And yeah, I'm glad he's getting nerfed. So there's some stuff happening to Ivan. I know Riot initially said they wanted him to be kind of like moving into the support role. I believe that that's not necessarily happening at the moment, but be aware that Ivan's support could still end up being a thing because of this patch. There's a lot of things going on to him as well, which I don't necessarily want to dive too much into because it is very off meta at this moment in time, but it could become meta into the next patch. Is something that we're going to have to keep our eye on, but it's not something that I'm going to be advocating for you guys to necessarily do to climb in solo queue. If you want to try this out in your normal games, feel free to do so, but this tier list is primarily to do with solo queue climbing, and I do not recommend you try this in your solo queue games, but do it in normals and give it a go and see, and you know, report back and tell me how Ivan's support is in the new patch. Jinx got, this doesn't seem much, but it's actually quite a big nerf. Attack speed nerf is basically punishing people for not using their minigun properly. So, you know, once again, Jinx getting nerfed will affect those hyper carry supports like the Milio, like the Zona, Lulu. Callista is getting buffed, I think. Kind of, not really actually. Is she? Wait a minute. These are kind of like buffs but also nerfs at the same time. It's like a big adjustment actually. I don't know if these are buffs or not. It looks like a slight nerf actually. Not many people were playing Callista anyway. The Callistas I did play with in high elo were particularly good and did make her look absolutely broken. So I think that's been like just a high elo. The pretty large buffs, they're buffing her. But this kind of looks like nerfs though, because it's like attack speed. I know it's attack damage growth. It's going down though. Attack damage is going down. How is this a buff? Damage dealt on here. Sorry, I'm just a bit. I didn't. What? They're saying they're dramatically buffing her, but I don't see the dramatic buff. Better AD% scaling on her E rend, but it's down earlier. Okay, I'd question what ping on that one. I don't know if that's even a buff or enough. Other stuff. Okay, here we go. Support items. We got there in the end. Ardent Sensor, flat 20%, full stop. Does not matter what the target is that you're buffing is in terms of their level. So the higher the level, the target that you are buffing that would to apply Ardent, the higher attack speed that they would get. Flat 20 is basically late game nerf, 100%. Early game, if you're rushing Ardent, it's a slight buff for a little while, but nobody does that. So overall, Ardent Sensor kind of got nerfed. But I have a controversial opinion. I think Staff of Flowing Water is absolutely broken. Don't tell Riot this. If you're Riot, close your ears, like 20 seconds ago. I think Staff of Flowing Water is actually giga broken. I rate it higher than Ardent Sensor anyway. Now, always prioritize Staff of Flowing Water over Ardent. Unless the person that you're playing with, hypercarry, is doing insanely well. Okay, Staff of Flowing Water is just so goddamn good right now. If you're running Echoes of Hylia, Font of Life, it's just going to constantly apply extra 20 to haste for everyone, a good amount of AP, which is generically good, obviously really good for those mid laners that have, you know, even if they got death cap, there are some champions like Syndra, for example, that can scale additionally off AP. So yeah, Staff of Flowing Water is very, very, very good right now. Ardent Sensor is being like looked at too much, so shh. Echoes of Hylia. I didn't think Echoes of Hylia, the controversial opinion, I don't think Echoes of Hylia was OP. I think it was just that the fact that Moonstone and Shrillia's got nerfed, and Moonstone is giga bad, right? And now it's getting buffed again, but I think Moonstone isn't going to be particularly super duper amazing. I am very strong about the opinion that Echoes of Hylia is actually balanced, but the other items are absolutely garbage. I could say that Echoes of Hylia could probably use not necessarily proccing off Font of Life. That would nerf Echoes of Hylia, and then they could balance it properly after that. But honestly, in current state, apart from maybe interactions with like a Glacial Augment Font of Life, I don't think it's that bad. I really don't. So yeah, I think if they make it so that it doesn't like maybe Glacial Augment doesn't proc Font of Life or something goofy like that, then I don't honestly think this item is a problem. But anyway, they're nerfing it. Mainly late game nerfs in particular, but nothing too crazy. I think Echoes of Hylia is still going to be the strongest item, particularly if you're using Font of Life secondary rune. It's just a bit weaker, but it's like the clear one really, unless you're playing going to Moonstone, unless you're necessarily playing like Soraka, maybe Sona now. So the issue with Moonstone was two things. They haven't mentioned it once in this okay, but they didn't mention it in the tooltip, but they actually mentioned it here. So there was actually a bug that got fixed a few days ago. Okay, I don't think anyone noticed, but Moonstone was terrible. But there was a bug that where the reflecting chain wasn't working with AoE shields, so that would affect obviously Sona, Seraphine. But yeah, Sona was the main one. I think Moonstone might be valid now for Sona, Soraka. Those probably are the only two. I think it might be fireable. The buffs aren't giga strong. They're being cautious on it because of the bug fix. But I think Moonstone will work on those. I would probably also do it on Milio, or even, well, no, I wouldn't. I'd do Ceruleas and Milio. Yeah, the hyper support carries need Ceruleas. So the only two champions I can think of right now that are really going to use Moonstone properly is Soraka and Sona. Moving down, I think that's everything. One thing I would say, okay, so Yumumu's that's going to affect Senna and Pike. Yumumu's was absolutely broken. It's getting giga nerfed. Thank God for that. Yeah, I actually said it on stream that this item needs flat 5 lethality nerf on the max stack. So I'm glad that they actually did that initially and actually went even further than that on 8. So yeah, Yumumu's absolutely needed nothing. It was, everyone was taking it. Assassins were way too strong. All the physical assassins in the jungle were way too strong. So this being nerfed actually makes every single enchanter a lot stronger. It's going to technically nerf Pike, potentially Senna if you went like lethality like build. But yeah, the main loser of this I think is really Pike in terms of support, but every single enchanter is going to benefit from this. Because you just get gobbled up way too easily. So, yeah, hooray. So there's buff sharing now, which is basically like Ivan's passive. So I think they compensated Ivan for this change. But basically, when a jungler kills a red or a blue buff while their smite is fully upgraded, they will still receive the Hammer's buff, but an additional blue buff or red buff will also be dropped on the ground, like if you've played with Ivan. So be careful when walking over blue buff and red buff if you're not assigned to take those things later on into the game, because you could prevent like your mid laner from picking it up. So that's going to be like the only kind of weird thing that's going to be happening in this patch, is like getting used to junglers, everyone basically being Ivan in that regard later on into the game. Okay, well let's actually go on to the tier list now. Nothing changed in tier 5 or tier 4, so I'm just going to skim up from that. Senna did get moved down from tier 1 to tier 3. I think she probably would have stayed tier 2. Tier 1 was too high initially. Tier 2 is more fair. Tier 3 with the Yumumu's change because she was like able to exploit that. I don't think Yumumu's Ghostblade is now going to be particularly taken too much now. I think Senna also just generally is slipping away. So yeah, for now, Senna tier 3. You've got champions there like Lulu, hyper carries. You don't really want to play them too much in the early ELOs. Plus, like honestly, Milio is just better than Lulu at the moment. Milio is higher up. Nothing really else to mention there. Got Vel'Koz. I think I did move down from tier 2 to tier 3, but I did replace that with Xerath. So Xerath, I think I swapped the Xerath and the Vel'Koz over, primarily because of win rates. So some of these, sometimes I do take into consideration like win rates. I don't see Vel'Koz or Xerath's really played in my ELO, so as always, these tier lists are catered towards unranked to around about like plat-ish. So if you're anywhere in between those ELOs, this tier list will totally apply to you. So sometimes the outliners, like the extreme outliners or AP supports, I have to kind of check on win rates. It's the same kind with the brand as well. I have to keep monitoring these champions to make sure that they're still viable. But the Vel'Koz and the Xerath kind of swapped over this patch. So if you are wanting to play a sieging mage, Xerath is the best sieging mage. There's still one more AP support in tier 1 still, but this is the best sieging one if you want to go siege. Milio is the best hyper carry individual. So like if you got a Cockmore, I would urgently tell you like go Milio, Jinx, Milio, etc. Milio over Lulu every time. Annie's actually still really good. No one's picking her, but she's actually, when she is taken and the sample size is okay, she's actually doing like quite well. She's just kind of forgotten right now, but Annie Rell could easily make a proper return. So if you want to play something a little bit like out there, then Annie's support is 100% still viable. Soraka's still tier 2. If it wasn't for the Moonstone bug fix and the Moonstone buff, she would have moved down to tier 3 and giving her another chance at tier 2. I think last patch she slipped down to tier 3. But yeah, tier 2 potentially with the Moonstone. We're going to have to double check it and have a look at that. But we'll see. One thing, Rell. At Rell, let's go back to tier 3. Rell, I'm putting tier 3. I'm staying conservative also because this tier list is for unranked to plat. She is not really a champion you should be playing anyway. I think she will be okay once you get used to how her new way of engaging is. It's just, I wouldn't recommend playing it this patch. Just give it 2 weeks and then see after that. I don't think you should play it right now. And in tier 1, I actually moved Amumu up. Amumu is actually doing outstandingly well right now. In terms of tanks. So if you actually want to play a tank support right now, Amumu is actually back at tier 1. He had that slight nerf earlier. That was more towards the jungle. It's not going to affect his win rate as support. Amumu is definitely like clear #1 tank right now. Zyra is the best mage overall. Sona would have dipped down into tier 2 if it were not for Moonstone change. Once again, giving that a chance as well. There is a chance you could still slip into tier 2. We're going to need to test Moonstone properly, but I feel like it should be good, especially with Echoes being nerfed slightly, so it should try to balance out that. And Sona in general is particularly strong still anyway. And Janna did particularly well. I was on the money on that one. Janna is still tier 1 with the Echoes of Hylia, Glacial Augment, Font of Life. Janna is doing very well as well. So everything in tier 1 should be absolutely 100%, absolutely fine for you to play in solo queue. Tier 2 is also really good too. Once you're going down into tier 3, you're getting into like you're on your own territory. Play at your own risk, tier 3 and below. But tier 1 and tier 2 are your standout choices. You've got plenty of champions to choose there from. You got tanks of the Amumu, the Blitzcrank, the Rakan, the Taric, mages. You've got Zyra, you've got Brand and Xerath. All of those really good. In general, enchanters, Sona, Janna, Nami should absolutely be fine. Hyper carry buffers, Milio definitely standout clear winner there. You've got your off meta picks as well, like the Annie and the Amumu and the Taric, all doing pretty well right now too. So you've got lots of different champions there to choose from, lots of fun champions there as well. So yeah, all the best. And I hope the tier list helps you out. I will be putting up a lot of I'll be doing a massive league stream on Thursday, which is tomorrow, with the new patch, because on Friday Diablo 4 is being released and I want to stream that lots. So don't be too surprised if on Friday onwards for at least a little while I'll be streaming Diablo 4, and I hope you guys enjoy Diablo 4 when that comes out. But I will make sure that there is league content for you guys here as much as possible still, while I am playing Diablo. So I'm making sure that like tomorrow I'm gonna do a very, very long stream, so feel free to come say hi and give me some energy as well. All the best, take care, see you tomorrow, and I'll maybe see you on stream as well.